Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a look at, well, a collection of news reports from the 2024 U.S. presidential election.
Yeah.
All the way from, that crazy election day to inauguration day.
Mm-hmm.
And it might seem like a while ago now, but there are some pretty crazy bits in here.
I think it's easy for people to focus on just the outcome,
Right.
But the real story, the one that can really teach us something, is kind of how we got there.
Exactly.
All the twists and turns and legal battles and the tension, that's where you really see things start to, fall apart.
So we're going to hop in our time machine and head back to election night.
All right.
November 5th, 2024. Record turnout. The whole country was on edge, and it really felt like this election was something different.
Yeah, and I think the reports that we have definitely paint this picture of real tension. I mean, Trump's campaign had been pushing this idea of a rigged election for weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Really urging their supporters to watch out for fraud.
Yeah, even that morning, there were Stop the Steal rallies happening.
Mm-hmm.
And, you had these images of volunteers, Democratic volunteers, working to ensure every vote was counted.
Right.
It's like everyone knew this was going to be close.
And it was. Early on, Trump had leads in a few of these key states. But don't forget, we had a ton of mail-in ballots that were still uncounted.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly in Pennsylvania.
Right.
And that became the center of the storm.
And that's where I think things get really interesting, because some of these reports mentioned that Trump's advisors were actually thinking about having him declare victory before all those mail-in ballots were counted.
It's a tactic, isn't it? It's this deliberate way to cast doubt on the process before the results are even in.
Absolutely.
And it just fed right into that pre-existing suspicion that had been building.
And as the night went on, things escalated, and eventually Trump did declare a massive win in Pennsylvania.
Right.
Even though those votes were still being counted.
This was a pivotal moment. And the reports really capture it vividly.
Yeah.
He even claimed to have tremendous evidence of fraud and that the election was being stolen.
Wow.
All this without actually presenting any proof.
Felt like a turning point. It's like that's when things really started to spiral. The whole post-election period was just a whirlwind of lawsuits and rising tension.
Yeah.
What were some of those key legal challenges that came up?
Well, Trump's legal team, led by Rudy Giuliani, went into overdrive.
Right.
They were filing lawsuits in all these crucial swing states, trying to get mail-in ballots thrown out, highlighting all these what they call discrepancies.
Yeah, they were pointing to stuff like signature mismatches in Philadelphia, irregularities at ballot drop-off locations in Atlanta.
Right.
I remember thinking at the time it felt like they were grasping at straws.
Yeah, maybe. But even these flimsy claims can create doubt.
Yeah. Right.
Especially when amplified by the media and political figures.
Mm-hmm.
And they did have support. I mean, Republican state legislators backed these efforts.
Ultimately did.
Demanding recounts and investigations. The whole situation, it got really volatile.
The reports talk about a nation that's on edge.
Yeah.
Protests start erupting.
Right.
Clashes between Trump and Harris supporters.
Right.
Security was being ramped up everywhere. It really did feel like the country was, on the brink of something dangerous.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the sense of teetering on the edge is very palpable in all these reports.
Right.
And then something happened that was unprecedented.
Yeah.
Certain states actually appointed alternate electors who were loyal to Trump.
This was huge. I mean, it was completely unheard of in modern U.S. history, wasn't it?
Legal experts were sounding the alarm,
Yeah.
calling it a direct attack on democratic norms.
Right.
And it raised some serious questions about the future of American democracy itself.
And through it all, the tension, it just kept ratcheting up.
Mm-hmm.
Protests in Detroit, clashes outside ballot counting facilities, even reports of vandalism. It felt like things were really slipping out of control.
Yeah. The Justice Department had to step in.
Really?
Increase their presence, just try and maintain some kind of order in the chaos.
It's hard to believe this all happened in just a few weeks.
I know.
And then came the Supreme Court's decision. That's when everything changed.
Yeah, the whole nation was holding its breath as the court deliberated, They heard Trump's appeals. There were these intense arguments back and forth. And then a 5-4 decision in favor of Trump.
Which essentially allowed him to claim those electoral votes from Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
Right.
And basically handing him the presidency, even though he lost the popular vote.
It was a shock to a lot of people.
It really was.
I mean, the reports capture those raw reactions. Trump supporters, they're ecstatic. Harris supporters are devastated, and legal experts are just debating what this means for democracy.
It was a stark reminder of just how divided the nation had become.
Yeah, it was.
And that division was about to, I don't know, show itself in the most horrifying way imaginable.
Yeah.
The storming of the Capitol.
January 6th.
A date, I think, etched in all of our memories.
Definitely.
The day Congress was supposed to certify those electoral votes,
Right.
the day democracy itself was under attack.
It started with objections from Trump allies in Congress,
Right.
which just delayed the process and just fueled the anger of all those Trump supporters that had gathered in D.C.
The reports really capture this sense of dread and anxiety that filled the city that day.
Oh, yeah.
You know, tight security, huge crowds, just this underlying feeling that something terrible was about to happen. And then it did.
The Capitol was overrun, thousands of Trump supporters, spurred on by all his rhetoric and that Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
They broke through all the barriers and just stormed the building.
It was pure chaos.
Yeah.
Clashes with law enforcement, fires breaking out, the whole certification process was just thrown into disarray.
It was a direct assault on the heart of American democracy.
People were injured, property was damaged, and there was just this overwhelming sense of disbelief that something like this could happen in the United States.
It's still hard to wrap your head around, even now.
It really is.
It was a watershed moment. And in the aftermath, we were left just picking up the pieces of a shattered nation.
Fast forward to Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
Heavily guarded D.C., a city deeply divided.
Right.
Trump supporters celebrating, Harris supporters protesting, just a nation fractured.
And Trump's inauguration speech, it was a chilling reflection of that division. You know, he talked about restoring America's values and addressing alleged electoral injustices. But to a lot of people, his words just, they felt hollow.
The legitimacy of his presidency was under intense scrutiny. And the wounds from the past few months, well, they were far from healed. The nation was reeling, struggling to come to terms with a bitterly contested election and the violence that had, shaken it to its very core.
Yeah. It's important to remember, all this lead up to the inauguration, it wasn't just like a series of random events. This was a strategy by Trump and his allies.
Yeah, the reports highlight that. And that strategy was built on, disinformation, legal maneuvering, just this blatant disregard for democratic norms.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they started planting those seeds of doubt about the election way before anyone even voted.
Right.
Those constant claims of a rigged system, they were meant to chip away at people's trust.
It's like they were creating this blueprint for contesting an election.
Right.
Even without any real evidence of fraud.
Yeah.
Just create enough chaos and confusion to make people question everything.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it was very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, they tapped into those divisions that already existed in society and just turned them into weapons.
It's a reminder of how fragile our democracy really is.
It is.
Especially when you have people actively trying to undermine it.
It raises some serious questions about the future,
Yeah. What happens when one party's willing to go to these lengths to hold on to power?
It's pretty frightening. What safeguards can we put in place to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like we were really close to things completely falling apart.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the lessons we can learn. One of the biggest mistakes, in my opinion, was how Trump and his team used the legal system.
Oh, absolutely. They just flooded the courts with lawsuits. A lot of them were thrown out for lack of evidence, but the sheer volume of it created this fog, this confusion that they used to prop up those claims of a stolen election.
It was like a smokescreen to hide the fact that they were losing.
Right. It made it seem like there was something to their claims.
Exactly.
Even when there wasn't.
And even though most of those lawsuits failed, they did win one big one. A Supreme Court decision.
Right. And that was a turning point, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It gave their claims legitimacy, at least to their supporters, and it paved the way for January 6th. Yeah, and it's worth noting that the Supreme Court's decision was actually really narrow in scope. It didn't actually overturn any election results.
Right.
But the way Trump and his allies talked about it, well, it gave this false impression of a massive conspiracy.
And that perception turned out to be more powerful than the actual facts.
It did.
Which fueled the anger and led to the violence at the Capitol.
Yeah. The fallout from that attack, I mean, we're still feeling it today, aren't we?
Yeah.
Trust in our institutions has been shaken, the political divide has widened, and, Yeah, that threat of political violence, it's still there.
It's a pretty grim picture. But I do think it's important to remember that the story's not over yet.
Right.
We can learn from all of this
Yeah.
and take steps to protect our democracy.
I agree. The 2024 election and everything that happened after, it's a warning, isn't it?
Yeah.
It showed us just how quickly things can fall apart.
And it highlights how important it is to be vigilant, to hold our leaders accountable, and to defend the principles that make up our government.
Yeah, we can't afford to be complacent. The stakes they're too high.
Absolutely. Now, let's turn our attention to Trump's inauguration speech.
Okay.
The reports describe it as, I don't know, a mix of defiance, grievance, and even a hint of retribution.
You have to remember, this is a man who just orchestrated a successful effort to overturn the results of an election,
Right.
culminating in a violent attack on the Capitol. So his words on that day, they carried a lot of weight.
And what did those words tell us about his vision for America during his second term?
Well, what's immediately striking is that he doesn't even acknowledge the violence that just happened.
Right. There's no mention of the Capitol riot, no condemnation, no attempt at healing.
Exactly. It's like it never happened.
Instead, he just doubles down on these claims of a stolen election.
Right.
It felt like, I don't know, a masterclass in gaslighting.
Yeah.
Trying to rewrite history.
And justify his actions.
And it was really effective in solidifying his hold on his base.
Oh, yeah. It was incredibly disturbing.
I looked.
Because it showed that he hadn't learned anything.
Right?
From the chaos and the violence that he unleashed.
His speech was full of dog whistles and coded language.
Yeah.
Speaking to his base and pushing away everyone else.
He talked about restoring America's greatness and draining the swamp.
Right.
But it was clear what he really meant was consolidating his power.
Mm-hmm.
And silencing anyone who disagreed with him.
And he made it clear that he was going to use his power to punish his enemies.
Oh, absolutely. And this wasn't about policy disagreements or political rivalries.
No.
This is personal.
Yeah.
He vowed to go after those who had investigated him.
Right.
Anyone who criticized him, anyone who questioned him.
It was chilling. A declaration of war against anyone who stood in his way.
Yeah. It set the stage for a second term that, well, looked like it was going to be even more divisive and dangerous than his first.
And with that, we've reached the end of the road for this deep dive.
Yeah.
This inauguration, it was the beginning of a new chapter in American history.
Right.
One full of fear and uncertainty and the erosion of our democratic norms.
It's a chapter that's still being written, isn't it? It really does feel like we just went through some kind of political earthquake.
Yeah.
And the aftershocks are still being felt.
And as we look at all these reports,
Yeah.
you realize the 2024 election, it wasn't just about Trump.
No, it wasn't.
It kind of acted as this magnifying glass
Yeah.
that showed us all these cracks in American society.
Right. Vulnerabilities that had been there for years.
Yeah, it's like all these tensions that were bubbling under the surface, economic anxieties, cultural shifts, social media.
Yeah.
They came together and created this perfect storm.
Exactly. And Trump, with that populist message and, his disregard for the rules,
Right.
well, he was able to tap into all of that.
Yeah, he spoke to people who felt ignored, left behind by the economy, forgotten by the politicians.
Right.
And he promised to bring back this vision of the past that probably never even existed.
It was a seductive message, though.
Oh, yeah.
Especially for people who were just looking for someone to blame.
And he gave them plenty of scapegoats.
Oh, he did.
Immigrants, minorities, liberals, the media,
Yeah.
anyone who didn't fit into his idea of what it meant to be American.
Classic tactic.
Oh, absolutely.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, create that us versus them mentality.
Uh-huh.
And then you position yourself as the only one who can protect us.
Exactly.
And it worked.
Yeah.
He convinced people that the system was rigged against them, that the only way to win was to cheat.
Yeah, to throw the rules out the window.
Well, that's what they did. They attacked the election, spread disinformation, and eventually they resorted to violence.
The events of January 6th, that was the culmination of all of this.
It really was
Yeah.
a terrifying reminder of just how fragile democracy is and how dangerous unchecked power can be.
Yeah. It's a sobering thought.
It really is. So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to heal?
Right.
How do we restore faith in our institutions?
How do we make sure this never happens again?
Yeah.
Those are the big questions.
Yeah, they are. But I think the first step is to acknowledge just how serious this is.
Absolutely.
We can't pretend that January 6th was just some isolated incident
Right.
or that everything's fine now.
We have to have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
The ones that make us
The
uncomfortable.
ones we don't want to have.
We have to talk about disinformation, the erosion of trust, the threat of violence.
Yeah. We have to strengthen our democracy, make sure our elections are secure.
Right. And hold those who try to undermine the system accountable.
And maybe most importantly, we have to recommit to those core principles of democracy.
Absolutely.
The rule of law, the peaceful transfer of power, the right for everyone to vote and be heard.
Those are non-negotiables.
They really are. They are the bedrock of our nation.
We can't allow them to be chipped away.
We can't. We have to defend them with everything we have.
Yeah. I think as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's important to leave our listeners with a sense of hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even though these events were dark, there is light to be found.
There is. We saw incredible courage from people defending democracies.
Yeah.
We saw people across the political spectrum who were committed to being involved.
There's this feeling that we can learn from this and make our democracy stronger.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy.
No.
It's going to be a long and difficult road. But if we can harness all that energy and passion, I think we can do it.
I think so too. If there's one thing we've learned from these reports,
Yeah.
it's that democracy, it's not a spectator sport.
No, it's not.
It demands that all of us participate.
We have to stay informed, we have to talk to each other, and we have to hold our leaders accountable.
Yeah. And we cannot take our freedoms for granted.
The 2024 election was a wake-up call.
It was.
It showed us how quickly things can fall apart.
But it also showed us how powerful democracy can be.
And how much people are willing to fight for it.
The story of American democracy, it's not over yet.
And it's up to all of us to make sure it continues. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating journey into the world of knowledge and ideas.
Definitely.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.